You've been told that women want communication, that the man who explains himself, who narrates his emotions, who opens every window into his mind, will be the one who earns her love. It sounds noble, it sounds safe, but it's a lie. The truth, unspoken, forbidden, buried beneath centuries of social training, is this: the man who speaks less commands more. His silence doesn't make him passive. His restraint doesn't make him weak. It makes him magnetic. Because every word withheld creates pressure, every pause becomes a test, and every boundary unspoken becomes a wall she cannot climb over. Picture it. Two men walk into the same room. One speaks quickly, filling the air with explanations, jokes, reassurances. The other says little. He observes. He measures. He offers words sparingly, as if each one has weight. Watch where her attention goes. It doesn't drift toward the chatter. It locks onto the silence. It circles the man who reveals less, because the unknown always commands more power than the explained. Silence is not emptiness. It is presence. It bends the air around it, stretches time, and makes people lean in rather than tune out. When you speak less, you become the puzzle, the riddle, the figure she cannot decode, and that mystery is more powerful than any confession. Women don't crave the man who spills everything. They crave the one who guards something. The man who has boundaries she cannot cross at will. The man whose essence is not up for negotiation. Every society trains men to believe the opposite. From childhood, you're told to share, to communicate, to say what you feel. They don't tell you that oversharing is surrender, that endless talking is currency spent too fast, that giving her everything up front leaves nothing left for her to chase. They hide the truth because it overturns the script that makes men obedient and predictable. But look carefully. The men who dominate quietly, who conserve words, who let silence do the talking, those are the men who bend the room without effort. In the first moments of an interaction, she scans, not just for charm or wit, but for command. Command isn't in what you give, it's in what you withhold. A boundary set without explanation, a refusal that needs no justification, a glance that speaks louder than paragraphs. These are the signals of sovereignty, and sovereignty is irresistible. Here is the forbidden paradox. Women test men constantly with words, but they are undone by silence. They demand answers, but respect the man who doesn't scramble to provide them. They push against boundaries, but desire the man whose boundaries remain firm, immovable, almost sacred. Because behind all the surface noise, there is a primal truth. The man who says less forces her to feel more. He makes her imagination do the work. He turns absence into gravity, and that gravity becomes the axis around which the entire interaction spins. So let me strip it down to the essence. Speech is cheap, restraint is priceless, and in the end, the man who speaks less doesn't just command the room, he commands her. Psychologists, neuroscientists, and evolutionary biologists have long understood a paradox of human interaction. Information is not power. Control over information is. In the modern age, men are trained to believe the opposite. They are told that openness builds trust, that communication is the key, that the way to a woman's heart is to pour out endless streams of words. But when you strip away the slogans and look at raw biology, the reality is far darker. Women, like all human beings, evolved to survive in uncertain environments. Across thousands of years, their instincts were sharpened to read subtle cues, the glance of an eye, the tension of a jaw, the steadiness of posture, because words could lie, but silence never did. The ability to read the unspoken became a survival tool, which is why the man who speaks less isn't weaker. He activates that primal radar. He becomes a deeper signal, forcing her subconscious to scan harder, to interpret, to project. The more he withholds, the more her instincts engage. From a social standpoint, silence operates as a boundary. Boundaries are the invisible walls that define value. A man who explains every decision, who justifies every action, communicates weakness. He is negotiating for approval. A man who sets boundaries without explanation communicates sovereignty. He is not negotiating at all. This distinction is critical. Women are biologically attuned to seek protection, strength, and stability. But protection is not in the chatter of reassurance. It is in the immovable presence of someone who cannot be bent by pressure. Neuroscience reveals another layer. The brain's reward circuits are driven by anticipation, not fulfillment. Dopamine, the neurochemical of desire, spikes in the tension between wanting and having. When a man talks too much, when he explains himself endlessly, he collapses that tension. He gives the reward too quickly. But when he speaks less, when he withholds, when he leaves gaps, he triggers the very mechanism that heightens desire. Mystery is not a side effect. It is the fuel of attraction. Culturally, this truth has been buried under layers of conditioning. Modern societies reward men for compliance. Schools teach boys to raise their hands, to wait for permission, to answer fully and politely. Media tells them that good men are verbose, emotionally transparent, always available for conversation. But evolutionary memory tells women something different. It tells them that the man who is not easily read, who is not easily swayed, who does not hand over his entire interior world for free, is the man who cannot be controlled. And control is the secret battleground. The danger for men is clear. By believing the myth of over-communication, they step into a trap. They think they are building intimacy, when in reality they are dismantling mystery. They believe they are showing strength, when in fact they are signaling dependence. And worst of all, they confuse validation with respect. A woman may smile at a man who talks too much. She may even reward him with temporary affection. But deep in her subconscious, she does not anchor him as sovereign. This is why silence and restraint are not passive strategies. They are active demonstrations of power. They reframe the interaction from negotiation to command. They make her nervous system work harder. They draw her imagination into overdrive. And they establish boundaries without ever needing to declare them. The man who understands this psychological landscape steps outside the cage society built for him. He stops trying to win approval with explanations and starts commanding respect with silence. And in that shift from words to boundaries, he becomes something women cannot resist, a force they must orbit, not a voice they can control. Now let's expose the 5 hidden mechanisms that explain why the man who speaks less commands more. These are not surface tricks. They are deep psychological levers, ancient, primal, and unavoidable. 1. The power of restraint. Every word you withhold becomes a weight. In psychology, this is called scarcity signaling. The brain interprets what is rare as more valuable. When you speak sparingly, each phrase carries amplified significance. Instead of diluting your presence with constant chatter, you concentrate it. Women unconsciously feel that restraint equals control. The man who doesn't rush to explain proves he is not desperate for approval. In daily life, this is why the quiet man in the meeting commands more respect than the one who nervously over-explains. 2. The boundary effect. Boundaries create gravity. When a man refuses to over-justify himself, he establishes invisible walls. Women test men constantly, pushing, questioning, probing. The man who folds under this pressure loses ground. But the man who calmly enforces boundaries with minimal words projects strength. He is not a hostage to validation. He is the architect of his space. A simple no, delivered without apology or elaboration, is more commanding than a 5-minute justification. Boundaries without explanation become irresistible because they signal sovereignty. 3. The mystery trigger. Evolutionary psychology proves that desire is fueled by uncertainty. The brain releases dopamine not when everything is explained, but when there are gaps to be filled. Silence creates those gaps. A man who reveals too much erases mystery. A man who withholds fuels imagination. Mystery is not passive. It is a deliberate trigger of pursuit. In relationships, this is why women often become obsessed with the man who doesn't explain himself fully. His silence is not absence, it is a puzzle, and puzzles demand solving. 4. The authority signal leaders are not those who speak the most. They are those who speak the least, but with precision. Authority is communicated by tone, presence, and timing, not by volume. When a man speaks sparingly, he forces others to lean in, to wait, to assign importance to what comes next. This mirrors courtroom dynamics. The judge doesn't chatter endlessly, he speaks rarely, and the room hangs on every word. In dating, the same principle applies. The man who doesn't rush to fill silence with nervous words communicates dominance at a primal level. 5. The emotional economy. Words are currency. The more you spend, the less they are worth. When a man floods the air with endless reassurances, jokes, or declarations, he devalues his emotional currency. But when he withholds, when he spends words carefully, his voice becomes an asset. This economy creates asymmetry. She invests emotional energy trying to decode him while he conserves his. The man who manages his words like a scarce resource establishes leverage, and leverage is the essence of command. Each mechanism feeds the others. Restraint builds mystery. Mystery reinforces boundaries. Boundaries signal authority. Authority sustains the emotional economy, and together they form a system, a dark psychology of silence that turns the man who says less into the man who commands more. You now know the 5 hidden mechanisms, but knowledge without practice is nothing. The real transformation comes when you turn these principles into habits, into a survival manual. Each rule is mapped directly to the mechanism it neutralizes and reverses. These are not abstract theories, they are battlefield tactics you can use today. Survival Rule 1, speak less, mean more, weaponizing the power of restraint. Practical tactic, never rush to fill silence. Before answering any question, count internally to 5. This micro-delay forces your brain to filter out insecurity-driven words. Speak only when the words serve you. When you speak, strip away filler. Replace "I think maybe" with a precise statement. This scarcity makes your speech heavy with authority. Try this in daily life. When someone asks your opinion, pause, breathe, then answer in one deliberate sentence. The pause itself amplifies your impact. Survival Rule 2. Boundaries need no justification, guarding the boundary effect. Practical tactic, replace explanations with clarity. If you decline an invitation, say simply, "No, I won't be there." But if you set a limit, let it stand without follow-up. The more you justify, the weaker the boundary becomes. Remember, women are not testing your answer. They are testing the solidity of your frame. Boundaries defended with silence and calmness are stronger than walls, built with endless rationalizations. Enforce with minimal words, and watch how resistance collapses. Survival Rule 3. Let mystery work for you. Activating the mystery trigger. Practical tactic, resist the urge to narrate your entire life. You do not owe an explanation for every decision or every feeling. Share selectively. Just enough to intrigue, never enough to exhaust curiosity. For example, if asked about your past relationship, give a minimal answer and shift the frame. That's in the past. Then pivot to the present moment. Leave space for questions you never answer. Silence is not emptiness. It is the spark that fuels pursuit. Survival Rule 4. Time your words. Like a judge, projecting the authority signal. Practical tactic. Authority is rhythm. Practice the art of pausing before your key phrases. Deliver them with a slower cadence, lower tone, and steady gaze. Do not race to be heard. Make others wait to hear you. In arguments, do not counter every attack. Wait, observe, and then drop one precise sentence that ends the spiral. Example: in the heat of an accusation, simply say, "That's not my reality," then return to silence. One statement, perfectly timed, carries the weight of 10 arguments. Survival. Rule 5. Guard your emotional economy, mastering the emotional currency. Practical tactic. Treat your words like money. Do not spend them on emotional spirals, reassurance loops, or defensive chatter. Instead, ration your speech. Decide, is this word investment going to raise or lower my value? When confronted with manipulation, stop treating your voice as a debt you must pay. Invest your words only when they serve your frame. Example: instead of over-explaining why you were late, say, "I'm here now." End of transaction. Integration, the system of silence. These rules are not isolated. They form a system. Restraint gives your voice weight. Boundaries keep you untouchable. Mystery fuels desire. Authority bends the frame. Emotional economy ensures you never bleed power. Practice them daily until silence feels natural and words feel valuable. The man who follows these rules stops playing defense. He stops chasing validation. He stops drowning in explanations. Instead, he commands with less. And in the battlefield of relationships, less is always more. Silence is not absence. It is presence so heavy that it bends the air around it. The man who speaks less is not empty. He is full of intent, full of boundaries, full of command. Women feel this weight. They cannot resist it because it is the rarest quality in a world addicted to noise. Most men lose, not because they lack love, resources, or even good intentions. They lose because they bleed words. They explain until their boundaries collapse. They justify until their value erodes. They narrate until the mystery dies, and in doing so they hand over the very control they seek to keep. The forbidden truth is this: devotion without restraint becomes servitude. Love without boundaries becomes submission. Communication without scarcity becomes noise. And men raised in this culture were never told that silence, mystery, and minimal words are not flaws. They are weapons. Think about the moments in your own life, the arguments where you said too much, the dates where you overshared, the relationships where your constant reassurance became expected like air. Did it strengthen your bond, or did it weaken it? The answer is always the same. The more you gave away your voice, the less value it had. Now flip the script. Imagine entering a room where you do not rush to fill the silence, where your words drop like stones in still water, rippling power outward, where your boundaries need no defense because your lack of justification says it all, where women lean forward, pulled by mystery, craving a piece of what you never overexpose. That is not fantasy. That is what happens when you follow the system you've just learned. Every woman has a radar for men who cannot hold silence. They see the ones who fumble when challenged, who speak too soon, who collapse under pressure. And they also see the rare man who does not play by those rules, the man who speaks less but commands more. That man becomes unforgettable. Not because he tries harder, but because he resists harder. This is the power of boundaries she cannot resist. Not because you fight her with volume, but because you show her through silence, scarcity, and restraint that you are not a man to be controlled, that your voice belongs to you alone, that your energy is a currency she must earn, not a stream she can endlessly drain. So here is the choice: continue bleeding words into the void, or reclaim the silence that makes them chase. Continue playing defense in the battlefield of relationships, or master the strategy of restraint that turns absence into dominance. If this breakdown opened your eyes, don't keep it to yourself. Share it with the men you know, The ones drowning in explanations, the ones losing themselves in endless devotion, the ones who need to hear that less is more. Subscribe to this channel for more forbidden truths, because this system is not stopping. And turn on notifications, because every week we go deeper into the shadows of psychology, where power hides, where desire takes shape, where silence wins. Remember this: a man's strength is not in what he says, it is in what he refuses to say. Speak less, command more, and let silence do the work.